In this video, we are going to examine Father Crespi. A patron asks, was this man and his artifacts, Padre Crespi, legit? We will say in this video that some of the Crespi collection do appear to be very legit, and Crespi himself was certainly legit. He was a bit of a polymath, interested in different fields. I'm also asked, as part of the question about Crespi, supposedly, were there any Argentinian/German business people involved near Padre Crespi's death with relocating or selling many of these artifacts? Was Crespi involved with the Nazis escaping Germany and selling stolen artifacts? Okay, let's get on to these questions. The first one is easier to answer. The second one has possibly a more plausible explanation than nefarious activity. An interesting man, Crespi was a Salesian monk born in Italy in 1891. He was an anthropologist before he was a priest. In 1923, he was assigned to a city in Ecuador called Cuenca. He worked here for 59 years until his death in 1982. Crespi was also a cinematographer, botanist, explorer and musician. By relocating to the town of Cuenca, later coincidentally favoured by some ex-Nazis, Crespi could indulge his passion for exploration as well as archaeology, as the locals would bring him artefacts for sale, some fake, some real. It seems he actually accepted both, and this obviously damaged his later reputation. I do like to say that humans usually suffer from tunnel vision, only seeing one thing at a time and applying it to everything, and as such, it could easily be said by many that all his artifacts were fake. However, the running theory is that he was aware of the fakes he was being sold, but either wanted to remain on good terms with everyone or was extremely generous to the poor people whom he was helping. Or maybe he just wasn't always sure what he was buying if he was buying cheap, worthless goods or not. Maybe he bought what he knew to be cheap, worthless goods in the hope of later getting some very real, nice artifacts from the seller. There is a statue of Crespi in front of the church Maria Auxiliadora, as he was well loved by the people. Let's bring Eric Fondanicon into the equation. Fondanicon is a thrilling author. I've read most of his books and I believe he's quite a clever man. And I even wrote one of my own books, Confessions of the Gods, with that similar title and in a similar style as an homage to his work, but I'm sure not as good. Anyway, Crespi and Fondanicon. The story begins in the early 70s. Juan Moritz was a prospector in the jungle, and he is the one who allegedly introduced Fondanicon to what seems to have been a cave of the gods with 90-degree cut rock inside, as if it had been machined. Some photos are provided in the book that Danicon used to break the exclusive, the monumental gold of the gods. It seemed at the time that this was some of the evidence that he had been looking for in his own quest to show a relation between ancient religion, E.T., and our own origins, something Fondanicon had long suspected. It is said, however, that Moritz claimed he never showed Danicon the tunnels, and even that Danicon had not visited them. In Gold of the Gods, which many of us have fond memories of eagerly having indulged, myself on many occasions as a child, a teen, and in my 20s and 30s as well, because it's so much fun to read, Danicon tries to corroborate his claims about a gold library that he saw in these deep caves after having rappelled down a rope down several underground cliffs into a very deep location. Danicon appears to corroborate the claims he makes at the start of the book about seeing these gold libraries by later talking about the Crespi Gold Library as if these might be related to the artefacts he saw or heard about, and also, as stated, providing a few photos supposedly from inside, but who knows where they're really from. There is a later book called Taos Gold by an author called Stan Hall, who appears to have waited until his retirement to publish his version of an expedition he organised in 1976 as a response to Fondanicon's claims in Gold of the Gods. And this expedition was accompanied famously by Neil Armstrong, who wanted to tag along and have a look. The expedition, however, was unsuccessful, and they didn't find the cave. So unfortunately, the book Taos Gold does not shed any more light on the mystery. Stan Hall provides a great deal of information, but he didn't find the gold libraries. And another one of the weaknesses of the whole argument that you see in Gold of the Gods itself is that Daniken presents a photocopy of the testament of Juan Maurits, that the caves exist and are high technology and they extend for many miles and kilometres. But, why not just show them? Why not just show the caves? I have several books in my personal library about ancient America, and several of them do discuss Father Crespi. However, to my knowledge, not one of them has ever suggested that Crespi was ever doing anything untoward. The first I heard about any World War II German treasure connection was from this patron who told me about this and asked me to make this video. More on that later. There is a video on YouTube called Father Crespi and the Ancient Metallic Library, where a man called J. Golden Barton gives a most interesting and unusual talk. People have stated that Crespi wasn't aware that he was being given counterfeit artifacts because he would always give money for artifacts provided. However, Golden Barton states that on a visit to Crespi, he saw one room full of these fakes while Crespi kept the real artifacts in other rooms, and that Crespi was well aware of the difference. Barton states that because of this, it was decided that the entire collection was worthless, worthy only of being melted down for its gold value, and that is what happened. Therefore, much or all of the collection seems to have vanished. So, are there real artifacts in the Crespi collection? To find out, we need to fast forward from the late 70s and early 80s and all those old books to 2016, because megalithic expert Hugh Newman was at Cuenca in 2016, and he had a look and he made a documentary on the Megalithomania channel. And when he saw part of the collection, which was in the museum, he was immediately impressed by a megalithic tablet which contained the characteristic spirals found worldwide. And this was from the Crespi collection. So there was indeed truth to this collection. It did contain genuine artifacts, and this is the proof. I also notice in the video there is a bit of a building and this amazing figurine. And you can see that these might not be fakes, especially if they are a piece knocked off from a building, because why would you fake that? Later in the documentary, Hugh is led to a room, this is outside of the museum, somewhere else, containing the lost or much of the lost metal library. Found again. This huge piece of metal here looks like it could have been used, I would say, for wrapping a body. Most of the pieces were allegedly found in the jungle in tunnels. Many of the pieces of metal look to me like breast shields that could have been placed over a body, so they could well be funerary or based on funerary goods. Since they don't look like any artifacts I am aware of, I would suppose they might be based on a lost Ecuadorian jungle civilization with its own artistic style, and this artistic style is represented in the Padre Crespi collection. Then again, they might all be fake. Who really knows? Some of the metal library look like they are recently done because they are literally done on sheet steel. One looks like galvanized sheet metal which has started to rust. Others to me look like pewter. And where would you get that? In the video, Jim Vieira, who accompanies Newman, says it looks like junkyard metal to him, and Vieira is really not impressed at all. Newman is a bit ambivalent about what he's saying, reserving judgment and wondering who would have gone to the trouble and why. Okay, the problems I have with the hoax theory are that if you're going to hoax something, at least use genuine art forms. Copy something real with genuine existing materials. In other words, don't use metal. Why did the hoaxer use metal? Because you see, hardly anything pre-Columbian is made from metal. Gold was used prolifically, as we know, but this can be considered as part of the Stone Ages and not the Metal Age because it's found as it is, it melts so easily, it reforms very easily without too much trouble, and you can't rust it. I do notice, however, that metal pops up in pre-Columbian America at certain times. These are time periods such as the Irish Golden Age or even the Roman period, indicating to me that transatlantic contact with a metal-bearing, metal-creating civilization had occurred. There is one interesting tangent I picked up in the comments on the Megalithomania video. It presumably talks about a script found on the Crespi gold tablets, and the comment reads as follows. The script is 80% Hungarian Magyar runic writing. Funny how they refuse to admit this fact. Juan Moritz was also Hungarian and he made the connection. We must research this fact. And that's interesting, because if there is a migration out of Eastern Europe into America, could this be the ancient giants? Okay, let's get to the weird side of the story. Was Crespi actually Hitler? Now, I don't entertain this, but we read online that in 1981 a US Army colonel called Wendell Stevens travelled to Ecuador and encountered a priest that he believed to be Adolf Hitler. Nobody listened to him, of course, because the conviction sounded downright crazy. Stevens also claimed that Crespi or Hitler had stashed away a number of priceless paintings. Crespi, as one might expect, denied he was Hitler. So the story goes. Now, I don't know why this Wendell Stevens thought an Italian priest was Hitler, but there you go. A bit more on him later. This particular theory falls down flat on the basis Hitler was believed to have Parkinson's disease, and we read online that thus he would not have been able to live until the year 1982, as Crespi very much did. Now, there is an article on a website called coolinterestingstuff.com, and the article reads, Was Father Crespi Hitler? And the evidence in this article, which doesn't seem to have a specified author, because I guess you wouldn't want your name attached to it, states that 2,000 people attended the funeral of Crespi in 1982, as if this was the funeral of a king. And not only that, but he was laid to rest in a marble sepulchre and adorned with flowers constantly. Now, I guess someone who's not familiar with the Catholic religion wouldn't know that usually you lay people to rest in a marble sepulchre. I guess whoever wrote this article thinks that's a bit unusual, but it isn't. Now, according to the article, Crespi left behind millions of dollars in artwork, and some local Germans actually identified the artworks as having belonged to Adolf Hitler. It is said that on the day of his funeral, May 16, 1982, 2 cargo jets were loaded with Crespi's art collection and departed, never to be seen again. This accords with the video that has Golden Barton stating that helicopters were being loaded with artefacts. So is there anything to the Wendell Stevens story? I'm not sure if this man was even real, but he was supposedly a US Army colonel, and he supposedly made a trip to Ecuador, meeting this priest in the town of Cuenca, and Stevens became convinced that this was Adolf Hitler that he had met. But again, he could not get anyone to listen to his claims. He himself examined thousands of photos of Hitler, and as he did so, he became more and more convinced that he had met Hitler. Like Hitler, Crespi was a vegetarian, and he rolled his R's the way Germans do. but frankly, I think the claims can be dismissed. Crespi is probably who he said he was. Yes, notable figures, possibly including Germans or whoever you want, would have been interested in and probably did steal some of his artworks as Crespi's health declined. But I think this was simply because Fondanicon and other authors had prior publicised Crespi's collection to such an enormous extent, literally to millions of people. And he seemed the only reasonable link to Daniken's mythical metal libraries, and as such, his information about him was placed in Gold of the Gods. Now, did Crespi deal his art? Because that was part of the question as well. But you see, as far as I've ever read about Crespi, he never offered any of his collection for sale. But I think the publicity arising from many 70s and 80s books mentioning the collection can certainly explain the visits from wealthy people, patrons, or simply fans wanting to see the collection. Thank you.